Right now, I would like to welcome Mr. Mikel Arana, Director General of the DGOJ, as our first speaker of the day. Welcome, Mikel. I think we are very eager to hear from you once more about DGOJ's plans for the Spanish market. Hence, we are very happy that you could join us here today. The stage is yours. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Good morning. Thank you very much for coming to the 2025 Gaming in Spain conference, and thank you also for inviting the DGOJ to participate. The title of my speech is Algorithm, Advertising and Deposit Limits, Outlines and Obligations, and I will certainly talk about all of the topics mentioned there, but not in that order. Actually, I will start by taking a look to the Spanish gambling market from the operator's perspective, then we'll move to see it from a public health point of view, and finally wrap things up with a detailed look at what, from the regulator side, is a logical outcome of the first two. Let's dive into the operator's perspective, starting with the global title of this conference. Moving forward in a highly regulated market, at first glance, it may sound like regulation is holding the market back, but actually, that couldn't be further from the truth. As you can see in the slide, the GGR went up in Spain 48% in just 2 years. I'm not sure how many industries can talk about numbers like this. And more, this growth seems to be assured in the future, since in 2024, over 100,000 new players joined the gambling market, which means a 21% increase. But let's keep on moving. Not only that we have a market showing impressive growth in both players and profit, but unlike in many other European countries, most of our players use traceable payment methods. On top of that, the vast majority of players stick to just one operator, maybe two at the most, and that kind of customer loyalty is pure gold for any business. So in short, this highly regulated market ends up being a fast-growing legal market and full of customers who are locked in with their operator and their market skill to keep them spending money. Not a bad business. But let's switch to the public health perspective, because I'm guessing no one here will deny that gambling also has a public health side on it. The first thing we see is that this growth is in implied numbers is coming at the expense of the most vulnerable, the youngest. In 2024, there was an 88% increase in players aged 18 to 25. But that's not all. It's not that they are playing, it's that they are playing and, more importantly, losing lots of money. Last year, over 73,000 players lost more than 3,000 euros each between 18 and 25 years old. A market where, as you can see in the slide, 88% of the profits come from just 15% of players. And when it comes to young players, again, 18 to 25, 20% of them are intensive players. This means that they spend over 600 euros on gambling in just 3 weeks. So the next question we should be asking is there any explanation for this data? And certainly it is. The Supreme Court sentence on the Royal Decree on Commercial Communications. Indeed, this is the open door that reopened the door to the welcome bonuses that had an 85% increase last year, and the online activity of the affiliates, especially those on revenue sharing models, the blue line, who only make money when their followers lose money. No need to spell out that these affiliates are mostly influencers and tipsters of all kinds who target young audiences. So faced with these facts, what should we do as regulators? Obviously, protect the most vulnerable groups. So to do that, we, as you know, use regulatory measures, and we'll see later on why we do it this way. So we are going to use 3 of them. First of all, with the amendment to the Clients Service Law that actually is in debate in the Congress, looking for 3 different objectives: to undo the effects of the Supreme Court sentence on advertising decree that we have seen what has supposed to the market, to limit payment methods, and to limit also providers, mostly to protect from illegal gambling, that I think it's important to underline it too. Secondly, approving the Royal Decree on joint deposit. Hopefully, this fall will be approved, so in a year it will be running for all the operators. And finally, going back to the end of this, to the title of this talk, developing a risk behavior detection system that will be mandatory for all operators next year, running as an algorithm which I'm going to expand to the rest of my talk explaining. As you may already know, or probably you very well know, in Spain, since the Royal Decree 173/2023 was approved, we divide our online players in 3 different categories: participants with intensive gambling behavior, young participants, and players with a risk behavior. The rest of the players, the vast majority of them, are not categorized. And according to the category of each player, we apply different protection measures. It's easy to understand how we categorize intensive and young players, since the criteria is objective: net losses and age. As you can see, 600 euros or 200 euros, 3 weeks in a row, or 18 to 25 years old. So the challenge is to classify someone as a risky player. Which markers should be considered? And more important than that, at what point do we determine whether someone may be at risk or not? To figure this out, the government addressed 2 strategies. First of all, requiring operators to establish their own mechanism player at risk and submitting this data to the DGOJ. And on the other hand, just in case, requiring the DGOJ itself to establish a single mechanism for all operators within 3 years. After more than 2 years of this obligation being in effect for the operators, the outlook could not be more discouraging. As you can see in the following graphic, while some very, very few operators, I must say, have taken this obligation seriously, others, the vast majority, have now shown the slight concern for the protection of their own customers. These data are real from our operators. Unfortunately, our conclusion is very clear. Operators only apply such the goal of a social corporative responsibility when their economic loss is very low or they are forced by law. Fortunately, there is a double strategy, and that's why indeed we are here. Not to improve operators' failed mechanism, but to develop an effective new one. Actually, our aim is to create a model with a solid scientific background. I want to underline this one: solid scientific background that could be applied universally to any system by designing an algorithm. To achieve this, we relied not only on the great statistical team of the DGOJ, but also in the internal control system, through which we have data on all players and operators through the past 11 years. So, what did we do first? We identified the database that would allow us to define the model. To this end, we requested the authorization of the 506 individuals with a medical diagnosis on gambling disorder, whose complete gambling histories were available at the DGOJ. The goal was to determine whether there are behaviors that could serve as indicators of a gambling disorder. Once we have the database and the gambling histories, it's time to select the variables that will be used and to determine any adjustments of the model. As I said before, the goal is to define an algorithm capable of distinguishing between 2 groups of players: regular players and risky players. To achieve this, we must be able to summarize gambling data in a set of variables that can be computed efficiently to train the mechanism. In order to define these variables, we start from DSM-5 and the yet unfinished document by the European Committee of Standardization, CEN. As you know, according to DSM-5, the pathological gambling diagnosis is based on a persistent pattern of problematic gambling behavior that seriously messes up a person's life. To get diagnosed, someone must show at least 4 of these signs within a year. The DSM-5 criteria give a solid base for diagnosis the disorder, but more researchers suggest we need a more personal and flexible way to spot risky behavior. These studies highlight how important it is to include behavior markers that can help predict problems before they fully develop, especially when it comes to online gambling. That's where the CENTC 4, 5, 6 technical working groups come in. They are working on standardization risk markers to identify and prevent risky gambling behaviors online, Specifically, they focus on these markers. So once the DCMA5 variables and the CE markers are set, the tricky part is turning each of these criteria into something we can use to build and support a system for spotting risky players. Since we already have the history, as I said, of 506 diagnosed people, the goal here is to look for different variables that show certain gaming patterns shared by these diagnosed individuals. That way, we may be able to predict which behaviors could lead to a risky gaming behavior. In other words, if we can spot gaming habits that aren't typical for most players but are common among these 506 people, we can assume that if a random player starts showing these same patterns, there's a good chance they could eventually develop similar risky behavior. To do this, after an extensive literature review, we decided to use the following variables to objectivize each group. As I said, the data are taken from the 506 players. So, as you said, there are 9 groups, and these are the different data we use to objectivize those groups. The data are real. These are real diagnosed players. So I'm gonna keep on showing some slides where we can figure out if there was those characteristics or not. So the first group that is spending a lot of time thinking about gambling, they are 2 major variables: playing time and self-exclusion. This one has to do with self-exclusion. We can see here a player that had quite intensive activity, self-exclude for a year, and right away it increases the activity, so that means keeps on thinking about gambling even of his self-exclusion. Maybe I should start telling that we have select up to 81 variables. We are not going to look at all of them, of course, but I just wanted to show you the more significant ones. So in the second group, we have tolerance. So this is the needing to bet bigger amounts of money to get the same thrill. In this case, the rising trend in active days and daily action. So we can see over there how this is also a diagnosed player that it has like this curve that it goes up slowly, then it goes down, and it gets a point where he loses absolute control of his playing experience. More restlessness and irritability. Here we are using 2 variables: more aggressive contacts with operators, and this ties to a chaotic behavior in betting amounts and have variability in deposits. Unfortunately, we cannot use this variable since we do not have this information from the operators, but it could be interesting to have it. What we do have is what it makes to lose of control, and these different data: number of cancel withdrawals, limit changes, immediacy in betting markets to links a trend of picking riskier ads. What we have here, this is a player that has a quite regular behavior until he makes a big price, where it's that red spot up in where it says ganancias, and after that we can see that the intensity is higher, the deposits are absolutely crazy, the participants go up, and the retires too. Then the next group, it will be, we put 3 groups in one in here: escaping problems, discomfort, lying, and social, work, family, and deterioration. Hard to put into clear numbers, but it's an important behavior linked to problem gambling. It's tied to erratic daily patterns, so we keep track of the percentage of bets, number and money, placed in 3 daily time blocks: morning, afternoon, and night. What we can see here in the upper part of the blue chart, those are 2 diagnosed players. As you can see, there are lots of betting and very low resting time in the first and the second. The one down to the left, it's a random player with eventually no risky problems. As you can see, most of the bets are made at the last time of the day. And the one here in the last one here down to the right, this is Rabat, no resting at all. So that's to figure out how they work. And this one in here is to take account of what a risky player can play, how intensive that playing can be, because as you can see there, we have 5,727 events, mostly bets, in just 4 single months. And as you can see, it plays almost all the times of the years. Keep on going, chasing losses. Number of deposits after the balance hits 0. This is what we see here. As you can see, it's a blue line. It's a deposit, makes a deposit of 20 euros. As soon as he loses, make a deposit 20 euros. loses makes the deposit, loses makes the deposit, until he gets a big prize. When he gets a big prize, he withdraws it. At 2 o'clock in the morning, he goes to rest. So we can see here that it's also a real need of keep on making playing, trying to recover the money lost. And finally, need for financial support. So here we have another 3 variables: absolute and relative losers for day played, number of deposits, and number of different payment method used. So you can see here's the raising up. This is the money that he's losing, and accepted, rejected, and payment methods. They just told me they have 5 minutes to finish, so I'm going to rush a little bit. So, well, once we had up to 81 variants, variables that can potentially predict risky behavior, we had to see if these variables were good for analyzing risky behavior in the rest of the players. To do so, we took a random sample of 6,000 gaming accounts from the internal database from the DGOJ, making sure no one overlapped with accounts that came from diagnosed people. These are just examples of some of the results, but you can see there's blue stat from the random sample. The orange stands for the hospital players, and the dark red showed the time slots where the both group overlapped. Here, the objective is to see if there are 2 types of patterns, of playing patterns, and you can see the orange one, these are the diagnosed, so they have this curve. The blue one are just random players, and there is a mix, so you can see that it's easy to make 2 big groups, the risky players, the gambling players, so to see that the algorithm is working finely. And finally, here it comes the most difficult part. Also, if you are not an expert in statistics, as I'm not, this is the most difficult part, because when we have defined our variables, we needed to analyze the results to see if we have been able to build and train a model able to detect risky behavior within a high level of accuracy, minimizing the appearance of false positives or negatives. After making the different choices among different statistical techniques in which I'm no expert, so I'm not going to try to explain them to you either, we finally went with XGBoost. As you may know, boosting is all about learning from your mistakes. Here, how it works. You start by training one decision tree on your data. Then, once that's done, you look at which predictions the tree got wrong and give those examples more weight. Then you train a second tree on its update data. In the process of adjusting the weights and training, a new tree keeps on repeating, so each new tree focuses more on the mistakes made by the previous ones. In the end, you have a bunch of decision trees, and you combine them predictions to get stronger, more accurate final results. Also, thanks to this method, it is possible to dig deeper into why we get false negatives or false positives. Using our studio implementation, we generated the graph right over here, and it shows interesting because even if the model predicts someone not at risk, but he is diagnosed, since we know the model should predict him as risky, we have all his data, we try to figure out the reason for this false negative, and in this case, we can see that the reason is that this player made very few deposits, probably high deposits, but very few times, which is the red spot in the red. So you can see here it will be like the regular data it should check, and we have that red spot. So since the variables sorry, here you go. Yeah, this is interesting because since we know the most, probably had, but essentially, sorry, we did not cross the global threshold to see. We set for an account to be flagged at risk, but in fact, he is in risk even if there is a characteristic that not fulfilled. In our case, the variables shown in chart 1 are the ones the model considers the most with their weight in order to define the model. As I told you, there are up to 81. These are the ones that have a weight over 2%, that they have to do mostly with deposits, RTP from the player, number of participants, number of deposits, of activity, etc. As I said, there are up to 81. And thanks to this method, we can keep on training the system, and we are improving our accuracy up to over 80%, but still there is work to do. So essentially, we are at the point where we are just polishing up model that is pretty good to go. Finally, in addition to continuing to improve the system, as I said before, with a strong scientific background, We are bringing in national and international experts from prestigious universities to validate the model, and we hope that the model will be absolutely validated by March of this year. That is the time that the Royal Decree settled as the time to start using it. So that will be it. Any questions? If you want to do so, I'll be glad to answer all of them. Thank you very much.
Mr. Arana, thank you very much for sharing this in so much detail. I think it's very appreciated. I think we have a few questions from the room that we saw coming in Slido. Let's have a look at the first one. Mr. Arana, what action will be taken when a problem gambler is identified?
Well, this is in the Royal Decree. I mean, this is to detect risky players, and the Royal Decree 163 to 2023, what it says is what type of action you have to take. When someone is detected as a risky player, you have to get in touch with the player. You cannot make him like a VIP. He cannot be a VIP player, no promotions, have to play with his own name, number of accounts. So there are, I mean, when you define or you find a risky player, it doesn't mean that you have to block their account. That at the limit it can be done too, but it's not that. It's that he's going to have very high protection tools.
Clear, thank you very much. Predefined. I think we have a second question as well here from the audience. I think a part was answered by you right now. So when will the algorithm be ready, and when must operators have implemented it?
Mm-hmm. This is also in the Royal Decree. It was 3 years after it got into the force for the very first time. So we hope March, April, May, the very latest, in case that the validation from the international experts go a little bit longer. But let's say that the first trimester of the 2026, it will be the time.
Thank you very much. I think there's time for a quick third question. This is a bit longer question, I see. Will operators be allowed also to use their own detection and monitoring systems together with the new algorithms? And will it be possible to integrate the output of the new algorithm into already established existing systems?
Well, the operators can use whatever they want, but they have to use the one that the DGOJ is giving it to them. We have seen the chart. From 50 out of 54 operators, around 38, 40 have 0% risky players, which is hard to believe, but they can use whatever they want. But it's gonna, as our experts told us, the algorithm is gonna be able to integrate in their own systems. It's gonna be kind of easy to adapt the system if they already have a system. But we have seen that many of them do have one.
That's very clear. Mr. Arana, thank you very much for joining us here.
Thank you very much for your invitation.
Thank you.